Obviously, before that match, we got told we weren't allowed to like high five the fans or anything like that. I'm not sure if we were told or whether it was kind of discussed that maybe we shouldn't do it. So it was just like elbows on the way to the ring for the fans. But yeah, I never in a million years would I have thought that that would be my last match for like a year. It's actually insane when you think about it, to be honest, because I've been wrestling since I was 16 on like a full-time basis. So with wrestling just going away, it just feels like, I feel like almost like I've retired. I'm just like, I'm not ready to retire yet, you know?
No. And how has the enforced break in wrestling been for you? Because 2020 was set to be your big 20-year anniversary, wasn't it, in the wrestling business? And of course, you know, you're heavily associated with AllStar Wrestling, and it was meant to have been their 50th anniversary as well. And it was cruelly taken away from you. But how do you feel about that?
Yeah, and bookings wise, 2020 was shaping up to be like a big year. I had so many debuts coming up, and yeah, it just, like you said, it just got taken away from us. And it was just in my mind, I was just like, okay, like I feel like everything's like, after 20 years, everything's finally coming together, like physically and mentally. It's kind of, I always see wrestlers as like, they go from like being young and fit and healthy and no injuries, but they haven't got the mind for it. And then as they get older, like they get the mind for it, but the body is no longer there. And I just felt like I was just at the right point in my career just to make everything happen the way I want it to. So yeah, it's a shame for myself, and of course AllStar, like 50 years of wrestling is some achievement for them too. So yeah, it's disappointing, but I just feel more hungry than anything else. And like you said, it's like an enforced break, and maybe after like doing like 250 matches every year for 20 years, maybe it's the break that I kind of needed.
Yeah, and do you think that that's done probably not just your mind, but your body some good, kind of having a bit of a rest from the action and healing up properly for the first time in 20 years?
Yeah, and I feel like mentally as well, like mentally I've always been looking forward to like the weekend or my next booking, and not really living in the moment. Whereas like now everything's like been stripped away and slowed down. I've kind of looked at everything and be like, oh, like I'm actually living in the moment now. I found like meditation. I've become a vegetarian. So a lot's changed, and I feel a lot more mentally and like spiritually enlightened in a way. So it's yeah, it's something that maybe I just needed. I just needed to like just stop and be like, oh, look at all these trees, look at the sun, you know, things that you just take for granted normally. Yeah, I feel like everything in this life happens for a reason, and maybe this is why this has happened.
Yeah, and having the opportunity to spend more time at home with your family, your loved ones, I suppose, instead of, I don't know, being on the road. I suppose most weekends for the last 20 years you've been kind of wrestling.
Yeah, and obviously the football was still going on. My son plays football, he plays hockey, and I didn't miss a match. You know, I was there every single time. So there's definitely been advantages to this, but yeah, it's life isn't the same without wrestling.
Yeah, and are the plans that when things get back to normal, you might be able to do what you had planned originally for your 20th anniversary all over again? You still kind of got that in mind?
Yeah, definitely. I'm still kind of in touch with the companies that were interested in me then. So and I've actually had some more interest just recently. There's a new company called Claw on Merseyside. They're starting up, and I'm going to become like almost a full-time coach at their wrestling school. They're obviously involved with TNT, and yeah, that school sounds like it's going to be totally amazing. So that's one thing I'm focusing on now. As I'm getting towards like what I call like the back nine of my career, I need to kind of transition into more of a coaching role, I feel. So Claw is a place that can offer me almost like a full-time coaching job, which I really appreciate. So I'm really excited about that. And other companies that I've never worked for before they've been in touch too. So fingers
That's
crossed
really
we can
awesome.
get this going again real soon.
That's really awesome. Yeah, like I say, I'm sure it's more a case of when the UK wrestling scene gets back on its feet again, and it will. I think people are really hungry for wrestling and to go and see wrestling matches, and wrestlers likewise, chomping at the bit to get back in the ring. But let's skip all the way back if we can then, Dean. When did you first become a pro wrestling fan? What are some of your earliest memories of watching wrestling growing up then?
So my earliest memory is I was sat watching WWF with my granddad, and I vaguely remember the match was. I vividly remember this. It was Hakeem against Sabre Jr, and that was the first wrestling match that I can remember at that time. So yeah, my granddad got me into it. He used to sit me down. We used to watch like WCW and WWF together. Yeah, he was the one. And then from the age of like 6 years old, like 5, 6 years old, I just never looked back. My mum and dad used to take me to places, and they knew that if they took a wrestling ring with some wrestling action figures, then I'd be good as gold. So yeah, ever since then, I've been 100% into it. I've never lost interest like some people do. I just just straight through.
Yeah, and I know that when I was growing up, or certainly when I was a teenager, getting more and more into wrestling. Obviously, back in the 90s, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have streaming platforms like Powered 4 TV. But there was such a thing as tape trading. And you would try and get your fix of wrestling from around the world via tape traders. Usually I would get my fix of ECW and New Japan, All Japan, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and pretty much any wrestling that I could get my hands on as an alternative to WWF back in the day, back in the 90s. But I believe you also got your fix of pro wrestling from around the world in a similar sort of way, Dean.
Yeah, so when I was about 14, 15, me and my best friend at the time, Robbie Dynamite, used to get on the train to Manchester, and there used to be a tape traders in the shopping arcade there. And I think the tapes were like either £5 each or like £10 each. We used to get like 6 hours of wrestling on a tape. So there'd be normally like 2 events. So we used to just come back with bin bags full of tapes, and we used to just go through them. And Rob was into like Smoky Mountain and AAA and stuff like that. But my stuff was more of the Japanese wrestling, like FMW was one that I was really into at the time. Obviously New Japan, but my favorite was Michinoku Pro Wrestling. Michinoku Pro Wrestling from like the mid-90s was just, I just watched this and I was just blown away. Like Super Dolphin and Grand Nanawa, and the tags that they used to have with Kai and Tai were absolutely amazing. And I still say it to people now, like if you watch their matches from the mid-90s, they still hold up. They're 100 miles an hour, just all out chaos, just madness. You've got the arenas where the Japanese fans are just like sat on the floor, and there's no seats or anything. It's just insane. Yeah, them tape trading days were just absolutely amazing to me. Just getting back and just watching tapes. And obviously, when I was 15, I started the gym, so it was literally go to the gym in the morning, spend all day watching these tapes, and then Dynamite would want to go back to the gym at night time after he was a bit more inspired. So it was a magical time for me.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask, I mean, for anybody that's seen any of your matches, Dean, you haven't slowed down inside the ring at any point during your 20-year career, but before you started any formal training in the ring to be a pro wrestler, did you have much of a sporting background? I mean, you've mentioned there at 15 you started lifting weights, but, did you have a sporting background which might explain your pace and natural, athletic ability?
I wouldn't say I was really athletic. I used to love sports. I used to play a lot of football. I had to stop playing football because my matches for my Sunday league team were on Sunday, obviously. And the wrestling training that I signed up for was 5 hours on a Sunday. So it was impossible to do both. So I kind of chose wrestling over football, which was really tough because I really did enjoy it. My dad was a brown belt in Kung Fu. So I was always like hanging around in like his dojo, and he'd show me stuff when it come to like the Kung Fu that he used to do. But yeah, I was just all Like if I could play tennis at school or anything like that, I was just all in. But I wasn't really what I would call like a natural athlete. Like that came later on. But I was definitely a sporty kid.
Yeah, and kind of tying in with that, I know that you started your wrestling career at quite a young age, didn't you, Dean? But when did you actually start training to become a pro wrestler? And what did your friends and your family think? Were they supportive of your move into pro wrestling at the very beginning?
So I met Robbie Dynamite when I was probably about 8 or 9. And he lived about 10 doors away from me. But ever since we were little kids, he used to say, I'm going to be a pro wrestler one day. And it was always this dream. And I used to go to his house and we used to like watch WrestleMania. And obviously later on, we used to do the tapes. So I left school at 15 and Rob was a year older than me at school. So basically, after he left school, he just spent the entire time going to the gym and training. That's all he did. So when I left school, he signed me up to his gym, and the gym was like in a 3-story building, and the gym was on the top floor. And it just so happened that a wrestling company that we used to go to in Stoke, it's a place called Jolly's, announced on their show that they were opening a wrestling school. And the wrestling school just so happened to open on the 2nd floor of the building, which was absolutely insane. So we went along that first day and we just never looked back, and started training at 15 and had my first match when I was 16.
Wow. Oh, and was that with AllStar Wrestling?
That was with a company called GBHW in Stoke. And they were kind of into like the American Indies at the time and what they were doing. So like they weren't your traditional like British wrestling company, what you'd say like a typical British wrestling company. But on my first couple of shows, you had like Ian McGregor against like Mad Dog, Ian Wilson, and you still like had the like Alan Kilby and people like that. They were still around. Keith Myatt was there. Obviously, he became one of the trainers at the wrestling school there. So yeah, it was just kind of everything fell into place, and it was again just an insane time.
And when did you kind of hook up with AllStar Wrestling then, and how did you get involved with them from the very beginning? How did they find out about you?
So after a year and a half at GBH, we got in touch with Brian Dixon and said like there was 4 of us at the time. There's me, Robbie Dynamite, Kid Cool, and Mikey Whiplash. We were all training at this wrestling school, and Robbie Dynamite actually got in touch with Brian Dixon because we used to go to the shows at Victoria Hall in Hanley, which was like one of AllStar's biggest shows. And Brian just said, yeah, come along before the show and have like a tryout match. So we had like a little tryout match before the show. And I think we did some stuff that Brian had never really seen before, and he was kind of interested. So he was just like, okay, there's a battle royal on tonight, so you guys can go in it. And basically, for the first 6 months with AllStar, we were just basically thrown in like rumbles and battle royals and against all these big guys who beat the shit out of us, to be honest. And I think it was just a case of like, if these kids keep coming back, then maybe we'll give them something
They've got
more.
something, yeah.
Yeah, and you're talking like Barbarian from WWF was over at the time, Skull Murphy, Avalanche PN News. You had all these big guys, and then us little
some big heavy hitters.
Yeah, it was crazy. I think the smallest guy was like 16 stone, and like these were the biggest guys I'd ever seen in my entire life. So yeah, crazy times.
Yeah. Well, what do you remember about them early days with AllStar Wrestling then? Because I'm guessing that it's been an invaluable experience, but quite a steep learning curve. I mean, you've already explained, how there was a larger than life kind of atmosphere in the locker room. But did you feel a little bit out of your depth to start off with, and how did you adapt?
I was quite shy at that time. And I didn't feel like out of my depth, really. I was quietly confident, but So the way AllStar used to run it is they used to have the town shows where they were out like pretty much every night, and they'd have like Jake the Snake, Tatanka, Marty Jannetty. These were the guys that were first there when I started. So you had your big like town shows where you'd have all the big stars, and then the holiday camps would be on it as well. So the big shows we used to go to if there was time, but for us at the time, we were based on the holiday camps. So like me, Robbie Dynamite, Kid Cool, we were all there on the holiday camps. And at 16 years old, like wrestling 7 days a week was just invaluable. Like it was just, you learned to grow up as an adult, you know, like just on the holiday camps, like wrestling at midday. You travel to the next holiday camp, you go out at night time, you stay out like drinking all night, you get up for breakfast in the morning. Honestly, like in them days, the only time I used to sleep was in the car on the next to the holiday, on the way to the next show. It was just absolutely crazy times. And yeah, I think in them first couple of years, I did a lot of growing up. And obviously when we used to go to the town shows, like I was always really respectful, and I just kept my mouth shut and my ears open. And I learned so much at that time in my life.
Yeah,
not just in the ring, but outside the ring too. It's just there's so much going on. I just learned so much.
Yeah, and you mentioned Robbie there, Robbie Dynamite, who was a childhood friend of yours. You kind of went through, you broke into the business together, and you had so many matches with him, either against him or alongside him with AllStar Wrestling. Do you feel that you two kind of pushed each other to get better and to grow as performers and as wrestlers in the ring, Dean?
Yeah, I just felt like whenever I was in there with Rob, I felt like I was in there against my big brother, who was bigger than me. He was more athletic than me. And I just felt like he was always better than me. So like whenever I was wrestling Rob, I was always trying to prove a point, to him and myself that like I could keep up. And I just feel like out of everybody in my entire career, he's the one that always brought out the best in me. So yeah, it's having somebody like that was I don't think if I wouldn't have met him, like if I would have never met him, I don't know if I would have ever been a professional wrestler. Like he was there every step of the way, just dragging me along, like pushing me in the gym, pushing me in wrestling training, and sitting me down and just making me watch all this wrestling. It's just very much like a big brother.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've got a quick comment here from Mad Dog Mike Angus here, saying that he first saw you at a show at the Liverpool Empire around 2001. You really stood out because you was doing a lot more than some of the other guys on the card. That show had Jake the Snake and I think the Barbarian. So you probably remember, or do you remember that show that Mike first saw you at, Dean?
Yeah, I think the Liverpool Empire, with it being like AllStar Wrestling is based on Merseyside, so like Liverpool Empire was like one of their biggest shows. And I remember that weekend that they were meant to put on one show, which they sold out, and then they put tickets up for a matinee show, and they sold that too. So the venue put in like another day, the day after. So I think there was like 3 shows in 2 days, and there was like 2,500, 3,000 people there, and we were just starting out. So I did a rumble, and then I was in a 6-man tag match, a 6-man tables match, which included the Barbarian. So I was like main event, like for all of a sudden for no reason. So yeah, it was just a mad time, and I never really looked around and looked at anybody to see what they were doing, but I just knew what I was there to do. One thing I did on that show, I did a super kick in my match, and I was getting changed after my match, and Marty Jannetty walked in. He just looked at me and said, "Man, you've changed," and then just walked out. But that was Marty, man. He was such a joker, and yeah, I just remember, oh my god, like I've stole Marty Jannetty's finish. He was he wasn't using the rocker drop at the time. He was actually using a super kick, which I just never even thought about. I was just doing my thing.
And another question from Mad Dog. Did you get a chance to work with Yokozuna at all? Because I know Yokozuna did a lot of tours around the early 2000s. Was you kind of ever in the same on the same card as Yokozuna?
So at that time, I was still at GBH. Yoko was on for AllStar at the time, and one of the times that we went along to Vicky Hall to meet Brian, Yoko was on the card. So, excuse me, I did meet him, but I never worked on the same card as Yoko, unfortunately.
Yeah. So let's have a quick look. Another question: who was your biggest inspiration that got you into wrestling, and who was your favorite wrestler growing up? Great question.
I had so many good, like, it's weird for me because, like, for some reason, even though, like, I knew nothing about, like, I didn't really know any secrets of wrestling or anything like that, but I always used to look at people like Mr. Perfect and Owen Hart, who, like, and like Bret Hart and people like that. And I used to look at them and think, wow, they're so good at wrestling. Even though, like, I was so young, I shouldn't really be thinking about, like, how good they are technically at wrestling. Like, I appreciate them guys now, but, like, for some reason, I was always drawn to, like Owen and Mr. Perfect and people like that when I was watching WWF. So yeah, I'd say them. But I was never really into, like, the big gimmicky stars for some reason. It was always like the smaller, more technical guys that I was drawn towards.
Yeah. Let's have a quick look at the next question then, because I used to watch AllStar Wrestling from the town hall in Oxford, the Oxford City Centre, back in the 90s. Now I'm talking kind of the early 90s. You had the likes of the Bomber, Pat Roach, Giant Haystacks, Norman Smiley, Danny Boy Collins on the card. I even remember a post WWF Dynamite kid, Tom Billington, being on a card, I think in about 1993 or 1994, looked a shadow of his former self, but still amazing to think that I got to see Dynamite Kid wrestle in the flesh. But all the AllStar Wrestling, they were renowned for bringing in international superstars, weren't they? People from around the world, former WWF talent. Do you have any fun or interesting stories of when some of these big international wrestlers came over to the UK?
It was just crazy for me. Like, obviously being such a big WWF fan growing up, I was just suddenly, like, on the shows with, like, the likes of Tatanka, with Marty, with all these guys, and I was just like, wow, this is crazy. And like, even like later on in my career, like, I met Gangrel and I wrestled Gangrel quite a bit, became really good friends, like. And then Gangrel's, like, staying at my house, and I'm just like, Gangrel's, like, asleep upstairs in my house. Like, what is going on? And
that's mind blowing. Yeah,
I feel like the magic wears off as you, like, do more and more years in wrestling. You kind of look at people as more like friends, as opposed to, like, I never think of, like, oh yeah, like when I used to play, like, No Mercy on my N64, like when I used to be Gangrel, like, that's Gangrel. It's just like it's almost like a different life now. But, like, AllStar Wrestling, like, as well as, like, the big international stars, used to have people like Danny Collins and like people that me and Rob used to go and watch wrestling at in Rill, in the Coliseum, because his family had a caravan in Rill. So we used to go there. So I used to watch, like, Finlay and Danny Collins and all these people, Johnny South. And then, like, I'd be on shows with him and I'd be like, oh my God, like, there's Robbie Brookside or something like that. And we'd be traveling with him. And I was a little bit nervous because, like I said, I was like a shy kid, but it was just mind blowing to see, like, all the people that I used to watch on TV and then suddenly, like, I'm in the ring, like, wrestling. Like, I remember one time in, like, 2002, I wrestled Jake the Snake in a tag. It was me and Flatliner against Jake the Snake and Phil Powers. And I was just like, oh my God. And I got a fall on Jake the Snake. And I was just like, I've just pinned Jake the Snake, Rob. This is crazy. So there's been a lot of times in my career where it's been like a pinch myself moment, but it's just one of them things. And then the more you wrestle and the more you look back at the history of, like, companies like AllStar and look at the guys that have come through AllStar, it's just absolutely insane. And like, even the guys at AllStar now, like, none of them get the credit that they truly deserve. Like the Tony Spitfires, the Frankie Stallones, all these guys do it the James Mason. Like, obviously now James is getting a bit more publicity because he's a coach at NXT UK, but for absolute years, like, James Mason has been the best in the entire world. But because he wasn't on TV, or he wasn't like on indie shows where he was getting all this publicity, like, nobody knew it. But now, like, people, like, I was tagged in on Twitter gifs earlier where it was me and James tagging together against Doug Williams and Mark Haskins, and people are like, oh my God, like, look at James Mason go. And I'm like, yeah, like, I watched him do it every single night, you know, sometimes twice, 3 times a day. So yeah, the guys at AllStar Wrestling, when the foreigners actually come in and they wrestle the All-Star guys, I think they're a bit like blown away, like, oh my God, like, who are these guys? Like, why are they so good? And like, why haven't I heard of them? And it's a really nice thing to see, you know. Yeah. All the Americans coming in and wrestling James for the first time is one of my favorite things to watch, and has been for 20 years.
Oh, that's brilliant. And looking back over your 20-year career, then, Dean, you know, you obviously renowned for All-Star, but another promotion that you're closely associated with is PCW. And it's another promotion that's thrived on bringing in international talent, certainly, you know, 10 or 15 years ago. But it was considered one of the bigger UK promotions on the UK scene before kind of, you know, the BritWres kind of scene exploded really around the mid, you know, 2010s. And they gave you so many amazing opportunities, didn't they, and experiences as a performer. Why were PCW so special to you, and still are?
For me, a big part of PCW, like, obviously the booking was really good. The venue was like, if you look at any match from PCW, the first thing you'll notice is the venue. The venue is unlike any other venue in the entire world. It's a standout. But the biggest thing was the fan base. Then fans kept coming back every month, and obviously they got to a point where they were turning people away at the door because the fan base and PCW became so popular. But it was magic. Like, on the way driving to PCW, there was just like a feeling in my gut, like, oh my God, like, you know, there's going to be magic tonight. You get there, there was just, the atmosphere was electric, and it was just a mix of, you had these guys that were like homegrown stars, like the regulars, against these big stars from like the indies or past stars from like the WWF. And it was like such a crossover that I think that's what made it so special. And in the end, what tended to happen is the homegrown stars and the regulars were more over than these foreigners that were expecting to come over here and be like the biggest thing since sliced bread. And the fans like had such a good connection and such a special connection with the regulars that I think that's what made it so special too. And yeah, the way that PCW built their regulars up too, whereas like myself and people like Noam Dar, we started in like multi-man matches in the opener, and then over the years you see the progression of the wrestler, where they were then brought into like matches further up the card, and then getting title opportunities, and then going for the big chances. So yeah, it was done the right way, and it was so special. And I don't know if there'll ever be like a special time like that ever again with all this going on. So I was glad that I was there at the height.
Yeah, the right mix of kind of how to run a wrestling promotion by the sounds of it. And speaking of, you know, PCW, you also got an opportunity to wrestle Jushin Thunder Liger in 2013, if I'm not mistaken. So that was another amazing experience and opportunity for you. How did all that come about to wrestle Thunder Liger, PCW, and tell us what a special moment that was to wrestle a legend such as himself?
Obviously with me, as I mentioned before, growing up, I was such a big fan of like Japanese wrestling, especially like the Michinoku guys and the New Japan Juniors. Like, I was always drawn to like the smaller, more technical guys, like I said. So obviously the biggest star of the New Japan Juniors in the 90s was Jushin Thunder Liger. And yeah, just out of the blue, just Stephen Flutter messaged me and he was like, I've got a big match for you. And I was like, go on. And he was like, you against Juicy Thunder Liger, and I was like, oh my God, really? Like, that is insane. And I think that was another thing that like people like Fludder and Greg Lambert knew, was when they were booking these matches, they knew who to put like the import against, who would get the best match out of them, who would appreciate it the most. Like, you saw like Noam and Lionheart getting put in there with like AJ Styles, who was like an idol to them. But me against AJ, he's not really much of an idol for me. But somebody like Juicy and Thunder Liger was an idol. But you put like Noam against Juicy and Thunder Liger, again, like Noam probably didn't know that much of him. So yeah, they did things the right way. And obviously Liger's history with AllStar, like coming over here and learning the AllStar style in like the 80s. There was like history behind it. And I took Brian along to the show, and watching them to like meet again after all these years, and Liger picking him up and spinning him around was great to see. So yeah, it was at that time in my career in 2013, that was the biggest and most special moment of my career.
Yeah, and I believe it was that same year when you wrestled Ultimo Dragon as well, which was another kind of hero of yours, especially from that Cruiserweight WCW era. So another kind of awesome moment for yourself. Yeah,
and like I said, like I guess I kind of had my niche where I was just like, okay, like you're in a match with Liger, you're in a match with Ultimo Dragon, you're in a match with Juventud Guerrera. It was just like throwing me all these junior heavyweights that I was such a big fan of when I was growing up. So yeah, they just knew how to do things the right way, and yeah, they were real special times for me.
Yeah, and then you become the PCW Cruiserweight Champion in 2017, Dean, beating current NXT UK superstar Ashton Smith for the title. You defended your title over 400 days. I think you held the title for 400 days against the likes of Martin Kirby, Chris Ridgway, Johnny Storm, Jody Fleisch, Ricky Knight Jr., and many more during that run. But what were some of your fondest memories during that time as the champion?
I just remember, like, at the time, I was feeling good. I say feeling good, like I was actually coming off an ankle injury that plagued me for a couple of years. So every match that I was getting put in, I was just like, okay, like I'm going to push it to the limit. And they just keep sending these guys in, you know, like Jody, Johnny, like all these guys with just as much experience or more experience than me. And I just remember, like, every single match was like, boom, like, that was awesome. That was awesome. That was awesome. Like, these new kids like Ridgway coming along, and Ridgway's like a special, like, diverse talent that I've never experienced. And I was just like, okay, like, me and Ridgway ended up having like a best of 3 series. And obviously you mentioned Ashton Smith, who was like a really big athletic guy, and we had 2 matches together that are 2 of my favorites in my career. So yeah, just at the time, I just remember like every match getting announced. Okay, like I'm going to go in there and I'm just going to have another match of the night. Which that's always been my goal in wrestling, to go out there and just have the best match possible. So so yeah, again, just a special time, and I just coming up from like just a multi-man wrestler to like representing like the company as a cruiserweight champion was just something that I took really seriously, and I just wanted to do my best.
Yeah, and a hell of a title run as well, 400 plus days. But you also wrestled in Japan, didn't you, Dean? I think for a promotion called Wrestle One. How did you get that opportunity? Because I'm guessing with your kind of quite diverse wrestling style, it must have been a bit of a dream come true to get the opportunity to go over to Japan with their kind of renowned history with pro wrestling. But was that one of your goals, to wrestle in Japan? And how did that experience come about?
So in 2011, Dragon Gate UK came over here. Dragon Gate, sorry. They came over here and did their Dragon Gate UK shows. And I ended up getting booked in like a bonus match on that show. And in my head, I was just like, oh, okay, like I've kind of just worked for a Japanese company now. Like I can die happy. Like there's some kind of connection there. And then 2013, obviously I wrestled Liger, and I was just like, oh my God, like I wrestled like such a Japanese legend so I can die happy now. And then in 2014, at the beginning of the year, an agent for Wrestle One came to a show in Butlins and watched me wrestle there, and decided that he wanted to take me to Japan. And I was just like, oh my God, like that's absolutely insane. Like
in Butlins,
like if you were
places.
This, yeah, of all places, just turns up at Bognor, just watches me wrestle, and it's just like, yeah, I'm taking you to Japan. And I was just like, if I was writing this as a movie, it would be classed as too unbelievable, because it's just not realistic at all. So yeah, in July that year, 2014, I got to wrestle in Japan for the first time at the Ryodoku Sumo Hall, which is like such a big venue. I walked in there, and you got all these banners of like Japanese like sumo wrestlers, and it's just an absolutely massive venue. I think there was like 6,000 or 8,000 people at the show. And just growing up watching Japanese wrestling, like I kind of knew what to expect. But when I was in there and you're wrestling in silence, and then you do something that they like, and they all react at the same time, you're just like, oh my God, like that's just how I saw it when I was a kid, you know, just watching these tapes. And yeah, it was just crazy. And obviously I got to go back there in 2016 and 2017 too. So Japan is the most beautiful place I've ever been to in my entire life, and it's my favorite place in the entire world. And I just feel so lucky that I got to do it. And it wasn't even a dream come true. It was just something like surreal that happened, and I still can't believe it happened, to be honest. It was just, I just never thought in a million years that I would ever get the chance to do that. And if I did have a goal in wrestling, it would always be like to wrestle in Japan. That would be my number one goal. But I never set in goals because I never felt like I could handle the disappointment if it never happened. But if I did have a goal, it would be to wrestle in Japan, because it's always been my favorite wrestling to watch, and now it's my favorite place in the world. So hopefully I'll get the chance to go there again.
Yeah, so my next question has got a kind of a Japanese spin on it, but I want to ask you about your wrestling style, or should I say wrestling styles, because, you know, you're renowned for being, you know, tremendously innovative in the ring, from your groundwork to your unique submission holds through to your kicks and your power moves, and not forgetting the speed around the ring. It's almost like watching, you know, the best of British strong style and the best of Japanese strong style all in one package. But how do you put together all the pieces with the variety of styles that, you know, you're proficient in, Dean, to make what we're accustomed to now as Dean ALLMARK?
Oh, it's very nice of me to say that. So I think what I would credit to is like just studying the game. Like I said, we used to go to that tape traders, and it's not like we used to watch them tapes just one time and then throw them away. Like, we used to study them tapes over and over again. And for me, I was always drawn to the wrestlers that were like really creative. The wrestlers that would like do stuff that I'd never seen before, like Chris Kanyon, Nova, all these type of guys, where they were just like, oh my God, like, what did that guy just do? I've never seen that before. And I remember Tajiri coming along and seeing his kicks, and I was just like, oh my God, like, I've never seen a wrestler like Tajiri before. So I was just always drawn to like certain things in wrestling. It wasn't like just an overall thing in wrestling. It was just like, okay, I like this, I like this, I like this. So over the years, I've just thought, well, if these are the things I like, I'm just going to do these things and then just mix them all together. And I just think, especially like, I used to think this when I first started wrestling, like, you can't be just like one style of wrestler. Like, you just can't. The wrestling has evolved where, like, it's just like an MMA. Like, MMA, like when I used to watch UFC, I was just like, they used to be like Hoist Gracie. He was a jiu-jitsu guy that used to just choke everybody out. But as MMA evolved, jiu-jitsu guys couldn't do that anymore because everybody knew, you know, you had to be like a well-rounded fighter. And I always tell people now that you need to be a well-rounded wrestler to make it, especially in 2021. You need to know a bit of everything if you want to go all the way. So I've just always had it in my head that I just want to be the creative guy that I used to be drawn to when I was a kid. Obviously, wrestling video games, like I used to spend hours on the creative part of it, like just making all these moves and trying to get like a guy where his style was just like a bit of everything. Because to me, that would be the perfect wrestler. So yeah, to answer your question plainly, I guess that it's just studying. That's all you can do. It's just study, study, study. And I always say to kids these days, they've got it so lucky because everybody's got a phone and you've got all the wrestling in the entire world at your fingertips. So you've got no excuse. Like, you should be watching wrestling all day, every day, if this is what you want to do. And if you study that much, then you can't go wrong.
Yeah, well, you're testament to that for sure. And a similar line of questioning, it's like, as I mentioned about your innovation with coming up with new moves, but you always appear to be coming up with new ways to hurt your opponent in the ring, Dean. What's the creative process that you go through when you come up with a new hold or a new move and then finally use it in a match?
I guess being a bit of a psychopath when it comes to wrestling, just like being totally obsessed with wrestling and thinking about it 24/7 and just thinking about certain positions. And you're like, okay, this is a position, and then you can go to this position, or just breaking down the entire move, like the start of the move, the middle of the move, and the end of the move, and then just chopping it up, and then maybe switching it. Like, okay, you start off this way, and then you change the position to this, and then just mixing stuff together, mixing moves together, and that's how you come up with new moves. And a lot of people say everything's been done before, but I truly don't think it has. Like, I know that I've invented moves that I've never seen before, and nobody has seen as much wrestling as I have. So I know that I've invented them things. So yeah, just being totally obsessed with wrestling and just thinking about it 24/7. Obviously, I've been teaching at the AllStar School since 2006 on a weekly basis. So having all them hours and just having the time to test stuff out is invaluable. If it wasn't for that wrestling school, I wouldn't have been able to create all the stuff that I've created. So yeah, I just wanted to be that creative guy, and my favorite part about professional wrestling is the creative part about it. Like, I didn't want to be just one of these wrestlers that comes along and be like, oh, like, I like doing a jackhammer, so I'm just going to do a jackhammer, or like do one of the moves that everybody else does. Like, if I see people like doing the same moves on shows, like in every single match, I'm just like, why would you do that? Why would you want to do moves that everybody else does when you can just make some up yourself? It's just, it's the creative part that I love. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. And what wrestlers or wrestling groups do you watch nowadays on TV? Obviously, we can't get to live shows, but and possibly take inspiration from these wrestlers, from their in-ring work through to their character work. Any wrestlers that you kind of like to or enjoy watching on a week-to-week basis, and kind of not necessarily steal from them, but think, that's really interesting. I like the way they work.
For me, it's the way I've always been. Like, it depends what kind of mood I'm in, and I'm just like I've got, like I said, I've got the wrestling at my fingertips, so I can watch everything. Obviously, I still keep up to date with like all the goings on in like NXT UK and places like that, and Japan, and then you've got the wrestling giffers now putting out the gifs like every single day, and it's one of my favorite things about social media is having these guys like the wrestling giffers coming out here making gifs just like I would if I wasn't wrestling myself. This is probably what I would be doing, making gifs of all the stuff that I'd never seen before. Basically, I used to do the same with VHS tapes. I used to get my tapes and clip the creative stuff together and like have an entire tape of stuff that I'd never seen before. But yeah, there's so many great guys out there right now that I do enjoy watching, and it's impossible to single anybody out because, like, I feel like in 2020 there's there's so many good people around in wrestling these days, and just the game's evolving. It's crazy.
I mean, one kind of name that I'm going to throw out there, and for me, huge similarities between the two of you is Zack Sabre Jr. And I know that you've fought each other at least once, possibly a couple of times, and you know each other, I'm sure. But you've got a very similar style of working, very, very strong style, lots of groundwork and submission holds. Do you take inspiration from Zack, or should I say, does he take inspiration from you? Which way round is it? I'm guessing that you know Zack through your various meetings in the ring.
So Zack, I've known him for a couple of years, and we have fought a couple of times. I wouldn't say that. So Zack's kind of the same, where he's taken his love for British wrestling, and then he's put his own twist on it.
Yes.
He obviously does the kicks, and he does the things that you've never seen before. But I just think he's such a cool dude. I remember it was me and him in a tournament at PCW, and as much as I love the PCW fans, when it came to the actual technical side of wrestling, because there was such a drinking culture at them shows, they weren't really into the technical side of wrestling as much as I am. And I remember expressing this to Zack before our match, and he just looked at me and said, "Well, the fans can suck a dick, because this is what we're doing tonight. This is what we love, and we're just going to go out there and wrestle." And we did, and that always stuck in my head. I was just like, man, he's right. We should go out there and just wrestle the way that we want to wrestle. And there's a lot of companies like WrestleGate and places like that have basically come up to me and said, we want you to wrestle the way you like to wrestle. We're not going to tell you how to wrestle anyway. We just want what you do and what you like, because we like what you like. So they give me that freedom to go out there and do that. And that's what I feel Zack does. He goes out there, he does his thing. And I remember having this conversation with Ridgeway when he first started coming and wrestling on the PCW shows, where he was kind of at the stage where he was eager to please other wrestlers and the fans. And I just said, I see what you are and see what you want to be. You need to just be you and do you. And ever since that day, having that talk with him, he just went up and up. And I was just like, man, I love watching him wrestle because he's so different. And that's what it is. It's just about being different. And that's why when somebody like Zack Sabre Jr. comes on, you're just like, oh, he's so different than everybody else. So I'm glad other people are attracted to that too, because that's always been my attraction in wrestling. The guys that are different than everybody else.
Yeah, definitely. I want to touch on your years as a coach now then. A couple of comments I want to bring up on screen. So Mike Angus said you're the best trainer in the UK. So some high praise there from Mike. And I've got a question from Grizz. And it's very similar to the next question I was going to ask, but being a trainer for so long, who are some of the people that you have trained that you are most proud of when seeing them succeed? So I know that you've got a long history as a trainer, as a coach, and you've kind of been important in the early years of some fairly household names, I would say. But if you could answer Grizz's question there, people that you've trained that you're most proud to see when they succeed.
So I've had so many people, and one of my favorite things about being a coach is seeing these average people walk into the wrestling school and they can barely do a roll, and then watching them progress. And then you got people like Ringo Ryan, who went on to become a full-time pro wrestler, at an early age. He was just 1 minute he's at my wrestling school, hardly able to roll, and then the next he's on shows alongside me and he's living that wrestler life, wrestling 6 or 7 days a week. You got guys who come over from there's a guy called Vito Peru who he came over here and did the camps in the summer from Finland, and quickly realized that he wasn't good enough to be on the shows at that time. and ended up refereeing half the summer because of this. And then actually going away thinking, okay, what can I do? Okay, I'm going to move to the UK now, train under Dean. And then he did. And then before you know it, he's a full-time pro too. So that's one of my favorite things to watch. One of my best friends at the minute is a guy called Tyson Taylor, who came along in 2006. And another thing that I really enjoy is making all these friends, like seeing guys come in, bonding with them, and then all of a sudden they're like my best friend. And like I can put my life in his hands. Obviously, like these days, you've got like Toni Storm, who obviously moved here from Australia when she was like 17, 18, trained at my school, and look at her now. You know, she's making waves on NXT. She was just in the Royal Rumble just this week. You got Zaya Brookside on NXT UK, just absolutely smashing it. And she actually moved from like Leicester to the world to train with me at my school. So yeah, seeing all the success, it's like, for me, it's like so satisfying as a coach. Like I just want people like Tony, like who just like they're desperate to learn. And then the more you teach, the more they want to learn. They're just soaking it up like a sponge. It's just absolutely insane to watch. And watching people like Tyson Taylor coming into his own now, and all these people wanting to do podcasts with him. They want to book him on the shows, and just seeing the success and watching them just living the rest of their life is just so satisfying for me.
Yeah. And I've got Tyson Taylor on the podcast next week, as a matter of fact. So that'd be really cool to kind of talk about, yourself as his trainer and his coach, and be good to hear his wrestling story. But have you ever considered coaching in a bigger promotion? I know that you mentioned earlier, Claw, that you're going to be working alongside TNT. You've done coaching since 2006 with AllStar, but have you ever been approached, or would you consider a role as a coach with, say, NXT UK, especially now they've got the UKPC over in London? Is it something you've ever considered? There's a really good crop of talent in the NXT UK roster, many of whom you've probably helped or wrestled over the years. But would that be something that you would consider if it was passed your way?
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. And NXT UK now have got like great coaches. They've got like Johnny Saint there. They've got Johnny Moss there. They've got James Mason there. They've got so many good coaches. It would be impossible for me to be like bitter in any way. But yeah, if they come along and offer me a role, I definitely take it 100%, because there's so much potential in NXT UK. You watch the show, you just think, oh my God, like you watch these guys, there's so much talent there. And I know what I could bring to the table would be beneficial to them. So who knows? Fingers crossed. Let's see what happens.
Who knows?
I just enjoy coaching. I enjoy doing seminars. Did a seminar in Ireland, and I met Tucker over there. He used to be signed for NXT UK, and he's such a nice guy. He ended up coming over here after meeting him in Ireland, and we became great friends. And that's another thing I love about wrestling. You travel around, you're doing these seminars, and you're spotting all this talent in all these places, people that you've never seen before. That person's got something right there, Yeah. I just love teaching wrestling. I would teach wrestling anywhere. So yeah, if NXT UK come knocking, I'd definitely take it 100%.
There we go. And on the subject of kind of young wrestling talents to keep an eye on for the future, when things get back to normal, of course, are there any kind of young British wrestlers, male or female, that we should be keeping our eyes on over the next year, 2 years, when things get back to normal, that have a really bright future in the business?
There's so many. One thing I would say, like, to anybody that's got like an all-star show or a first-class wrestling show in their area, go along to that show, because I think people have this kind of like thing in the head where like all-star wrestlers are just like flag waving, like clappy happy, like pantomime entertainers, which we are to an extent. But when it comes to the actual wrestling, like there isn't many better wrestlers in the entire world than the likes of like Joel Redman, who wrestled in NXT as Oliver Gray. Like, if you go on YouTube, watch his match against Okada for Rev Pro, absolutely amazing. And you look at Joel, he's a physical specimen. He's got the total package, you know. Adam Maxted, the same. Adam Maxted, in a couple of years' time, he's going to be such a big star. Like, he's 100% going to be in WWE. Probably wrestling Drew McIntyre for the title. You got all these guys, Tony Spitfire. If you're a fan of like the British wrestling style, you watch Tony Spitfire on a show. He embodies British wrestling. It really does. Watch him against myself or James Mason in a wrestling match, in a traditional British wrestling match. It'll knock your socks off. It really would. And it just befuddles me that all these guys are around on the All-Star circuit, and a lot of people don't know of them. But the matches are there on YouTube. So study, you know. There are some guys that I want to wrestle, like coming up, that I've never wrestled before. Like Jordan Breaks is one from down south who's like, he is that British wrestling style, kind of like a Jack Gallagher was when he first broke out. So these type of guys, there are guys out there that I've never wrestled before that I do want to wrestle. And there's loads of people, to be honest, I just want to wrestle again, but there are loads of people who I want to wrestle again. There's a guy in America that used to be Ring of Honor tag team champion called Harlem Bravado. He trained in the Ring of Honor wrestling school. He went to Noah, trained in the dojo there. And on the All-Star shows, he became one of my favorite opponents, one of my absolute favorites to wrestle ever. There are these people like there's a guy from New Zealand called Niwa. Again, when I wrestled him the first time, I was just like, oh my God, like this guy is so good. And that first time, I think it was like a Falls Count Anywhere match. We just went out there and just went balls to the wall, and it was incredible. And I was just like, there are guys out there that even I haven't seen where I wrestle them for the first time and just like, holy shit, this guy's really good. So, yeah, it's exciting times for everybody. And just when you think you've seen it all, somebody will come along and be like, oh shit, like that guy's really good. And there's guys out there like Sean Custom. Sean Custom's another guy. You're watching wrestling, you're just like, how is this guy not on TV all the time? Why is he not on Metallic every single week? He's got the total package. So yeah, there's loads of guys out there, and I'm sure the fans are just excited for wrestling to start up again. It's just as excited as I am, but I just can't wait to get in there and wrestle all these guys again.
Yeah, just a couple more comments and questions before we wrap up, Dean. But first of all, we got somebody watching us on YouTube, Graham Glasgow. He says that you are his nephew's favourite wrestler, so that's pretty nice. And a final comment from Mad Dog, Mike Angus. I'd like to see you against Big Guns Joe, Harlem, and Sam Adonis. Are doing great over in the States at the moment as well. So thank you there, Mad Dog. But before we say goodbye, Dean, because we're on the verge of wrapping up here, do you have any social media plugs that you want to kind of throw out to any of my listeners or viewers if they want to reach out and say hi to you on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or even if you've got any merch you want to plug? But you're more than welcome to throw out all your socials now, my friend.
Yeah, so just at Dean ALLMARK on everything, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. My YouTube channel. So one thing with the All-Star Wrestling shows is those shows are for that talent only, almost like a circus. But in the mid-2000s, I started my own YouTube channel where I used to record all my matches. More to learn than anything else. I believe that when it comes to wrestling, you have to watch your matches to actually learn what you do good and what you do bad. So I started that, and I've caught some incredible matches like James Mason against Dick Togo from the Liverpool Empire, Robbie Dynamite against Justin Thunder Liger from Croydon. And I think I've got over 500 of my matches on there. I think it's something like 620 or something like that now. So my YouTube channel is always there. YouTube is kind of one of these platforms where they're kind of like every single day I get another video that's been blocked in a certain country, but there's still quite a few matches on there. I'm wearing my Wrestle Merch Central top right now, cool. Which you can find my official merchandise if you're interested in buying any shirts. it would be greatly appreciated. But like, yeah, if anybody can just get on YouTube, watch a couple of my matches or something like that. If you've never seen me before, kind of check out what I'm about. I'd be very grateful.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure that the description to all of your socials and your YouTube page are added to the description of the podcast and the YouTube video when it drops. But as for this live episode of Wrestling with John, as Dean ALLMARK, you've been absolutely fantastic. I want to thank you very much for being a fantastic guest.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
You're welcome.